This video is about Nile Kinnick, an Iowa hero who won the Heisman in 1939, brought Iowa out of its depths in the 1930s, but later went on to be killed in World War II. At the end of the video, I have an epilogue with some facts about World War II that are relevant but not directly part of the Nile Kinnick story. Let's begin. Nile Clark Kinnick Jr. was born on July 9th, 1918, in Adel, Iowa, the county seat of Dallas County, about 12 miles northwest of Des Moines. His parents, Nile Clark Sr. and Frances, were deeply rooted in Iowa soil and progressive politics. His grandfather, George W. Clark, had been the state's governor from 1913 to 1917. The Kinnicks were deeply rooted in Midwestern values, and young Nile grew up during the Great Depression, a period that shaped his character and worldview. The Depression forced his father to sell his farm properties and take a job in Omaha, Nebraska. Nile transferred to Benson High School after his junior year in Adel. From A Hero Perished, the diary and selected letters of Nile Kinnick, published in 1991, we learn, when it came to pick a college, Verl Davis, his last football coach at Adel, recalled that he was determined to go to some school that was down. He didn't want to go to Minnesota because they were on top. He finally went to Iowa as he figured they were at their lowest ebb. When he arrived at the University of Iowa in 1937, the country was still struggling through economic hardship. Yet, college football provided a welcome distraction, and in Kinnick, Iowa found its brightest star. He played freshman football in 1936, as the freshmen were not eligible to play varsity. In 1937, Iowa went 1-7 and 0-5 in the Big Ten under first-year coach Earl Tubbs. Kinnick was selected to first-team All-Big Ten honors despite the horrible record, the only sophomore selected. Iowa didn't fare any better in 1938, going 1-6-1 and 1-3-1 in Big Ten play, their only win coming against a Chicago team that had by then de-emphasized football and would end it completely after the 1939 season. Kinnick injured his ankle in the first game of the season and was unable to match his performance from the previous season. 1939 saw Earl Tubbs replaced by Dr. Eddie Anderson. Anderson had played at Notre Dame under Newt Rockne and had spent his 6 previous seasons at Holy Cross going 47-7-4, including undefeated seasons in 1935 and 1937. Nothing was expected of Iowa in 1939. They'd spent the 1930s being one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, the exception being 1933 when they finished 5-3-1 and 3-2 in the Big Ten and placed 6th. They beat South Dakota 41-0 in their first game, and then Indiana 32-29, scoring more points in those 2 games than they had the previous entire year. The win against Indiana was their first home conference win since October 1933, and on top of that, our hero Kinnick rallied his team that was down 29-20 going into the fourth quarter, throwing the winning touchdown. Iowa lost their next game against Michigan 27-7, but then went on a 4-game winning streak, the last 2 wins coming against number 3 Notre Dame 7-6 and then rival number 20 Minnesota 13-9. After the Minnesota win, James S. Kearns of the Chicago Daily News stated, "There's a boy under the helmet which is shining like a crown on his head. A golden number 24 gleams on his slumping, tired shoulders. The boy is Nile Clark Kinnick Jr., who has just now risen above all the defenses that could be raised against him. He has gone out of Iowa's domestic football scene with an explosive, dramatic, incredible farewell party of his own making." L.E. Skelly, Associated Press, said, "Iowa's amazing ironmen and the fairy tale lads of 1939 football came roaring back with an almost unbelievable finish to stun Minnesota's Golden Gophers 13-9 before 50,000 frantically cheering homecoming fans here today. The indomitable ironmen, 7 of whom went the route as Coach Eddie Anderson used only 17 players in making another sensational gridiron contest, were battered and beaten for 3 quarters. Iowa's little band of heroes, however, wouldn't say quits. The last game of the season ended with a 7-7 tie with Northwestern. Iowa finished the season 6-1-1, ranked number 9 and second in the Big Ten behind Ohio State. Playing an unthinkable 402 out of 420 minutes that year, Kinnick was quite literally an ironman in an era when that term really meant something. He threw for 638 yards and 11 touchdowns on 31 passes. He had 374 yards rushing, 377 on kickoff returns. He hit 11 of 17 field goals and 14 of 16 extra points. He was responsible for 107 of Iowa's 130 points all season. As a defensive back, he intercepted 8 passes. Kinnick's extraordinary season earned him the 1939 Heisman Trophy, becoming the first and to date only Iowa player to win the award. In his acceptance speech delivered at the Downtown Athletic Club in New York City, Kinnick displayed humility and patriotism. Acknowledging the turbulent world events of the time, he remarked, "I thank God I was warring on the gridirons of the Midwest and not the battlefields of Europe. I can speak confidently and positively that the players of this country would much rather struggle and fight to win a Heisman Award than a Croix de Guerre." The Croix de Guerre being the equivalent of the Medal of Honor for the French. This speech resonated deeply with Americans grappling with the looming specter of World War II, underscoring Kinnick's ability to transcend sports. As Kinnick rose to fame, Europe was on the brink of war. The United States had not yet entered World War II, but the conflict shaped the national psyche. After his spectacular college career, Kinnick declined offers from professional football teams, including a lucrative $10,000 offer from the Brooklyn Dodgers football team, nearly $200,000 in today's money, to enter law school. His journals from this period reveal a young man deeply engaged with the moral questions of his time, writing extensively about democracy, duty, and justice. After graduating in 1940, Kinnick enrolled at the University of Iowa College of Law. Many believed he was destined for a career in politics, as his eloquence and integrity hinted at future leadership on a national stage. With the United States' entry into World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Kinnick felt a deep sense of duty to serve his country. He joined the Naval Air Reserve and trained as a fighter pilot. On June 2, 1943, during a training flight off the coast of Venezuela, Kinnick's Grumman F-4F Wildcat Navy fighter took off on a routine training flight from the deck of the carrier USS Lexington. His plane experienced an oil leak, and upon returning to the Lexington, he had to ditch in the sea. His body was never recovered. From the A Hero Perished book, a letter from Kinnick's squadron commander explains what happened. "My dear Mr. and Mrs. Kinnick, it is with deepest regret and sympathy that I inform you of the loss of your son Nile in an airplane crash on the 2nd of June, 1943. Nile was engaged in a practice flight that took off from the USS Lexington about 8:30 in the morning of the 2nd of June and remained with this flight until he was forced to land in the water about an hour and 20 minutes later. His plane developed a serious oil leak about 10 minutes before he landed. Having lost all oil, the engine, without lubrication, failed, forcing Nile to land in the water. Nile made a normal, unhurried water landing in calm water about 4 miles ahead and in full view of the ship. He was seen by one of his teammates to get clear of the plane. Both the Lexington and the plane guard boat proceeded directly to the scene of the landing, which had been kept under constant observation both from the air and from the ship, and was further definitely identified as being the exact location by gasoline and paint chips in the water, arriving at the spot about 8 minutes later. A diligent and immediate search of the exact location of the landing in the adjacent waters by both planes and ships failed to reveal any trace whatever of Nile. Since Nile was definitely not on the surface of the water 8 minutes after he landed, and at no time for the next hour and a half, it must be assumed that he drowned. Knowing Nile to be a very good swimmer an excellent athlete, and in wonderful physical condition, it is inconceivable that he could have failed to remain afloat for the short period of time required for the crash boat to arrive, unless he had been seriously hurt in the landing itself. I would like to emphasize the fact that there could be no doubt whatsoever that the exact spot of Nile's landing was very thoroughly searched by both ships and planes immediately following the landing. A water landing is normally a relatively safe landing, especially under conditions of calm water. There is small probability of serious physical injury in such a landing. It is very difficult to understand just what could have gone wrong. The best guess, and it is nothing more than a guess, is that his safety belt broke on landing, allowing Nile to lurch forward upon impact, probably striking his head on the structure of the airplane and injuring him to the extent that he could neither maintain himself afloat nor remember to inflate his life jacket. Nile was an outstanding man in every respect. His calm and determined manner, his quick grin, his sound common sense, and his outstanding all-around abilities made him a wonderful asset to the squadron and a man that we were all proud to call our friend. His loss was a terrible blow to all of us and a serious loss to the country he so ably served. Again, let me extend my deepest sympathy to you for your great loss. Should there be any service that I can render, either now or later, please do not hesitate to call on me. Sincerely yours, Paul Bouillet, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy, Fighting Squadron 16. Reactions across the nation were muted, honestly, because by 1943, there were so many young men lost to the war. The Globe Gazette of Mason City, Iowa, on June 4, 1943, included a response from State University of Iowa. President Virgil M. Hancher stated, "Those who have had the opportunity to become acquainted with him were even more appreciative of his character than his athletic abilities. He was modest, quiet, unassuming, and free from objectionable habits of all kinds, but withal a virile, vigorous, and intelligent young man." From the San Francisco Examiner on June 5, 1943, Dr. Eddie Anderson, furloughed Iowa head football coach, now a major in the U.S. Army Medical Corps, said of Kinnick, "In the uniform of his country, he gave everything. That was the only way Nile Kinnick knew how to play the game." Calls to rename Iowa Stadium in Nile Kinnick's honor came immediately after the Heisman Trophy winner's death in 1943. In November 1945, the University of Iowa student body voted to rededicate the structure as Nile Kinnick Memorial Stadium. The other options on the student ballot were Memorial Stadium and Robert Jones Stadium, after the first University of Iowa student to be killed in World War II. However, the student vote was unofficial, and efforts to rename the stadium were never pursued by the university. Note also, in 1945, there were drives to establish scholarships named after Kinnick. In 1972, a campaign to rename the stadium was renewed by a lawyer named L.E. Swanson. This time, the campaign was successful, and the University of Iowa renamed its football stadium Kinnick Stadium, ensuring that Nile Kinnick's memory would endure. His bronze statue outside the stadium remains a pilgrimage site for Iowa fans, a testament to his lasting impact on the program and the state. Nile Kinnick's life, though tragically short, epitomized the best of the human spirit. From his humble beginnings in Iowa to his exploits on the football field and his ultimate sacrifice in World War II, Kinnick's story continues to inspire. He serves as a reminder of the profound impact sports heroes can have, not just on the field, but in shaping national identity during challenging times. His life is a testament to the enduring values of courage, integrity, and service. You might have noticed that a couple of the headlines regarding Kinnick's death also included news that Louis Zamperini was missing. Zamperini had become famous as an Olympic distance runner. He joined the service and became a bombardier on a B-24 Liberator during World War II. His B-24 had mechanical difficulties during a search and rescue mission and crashed into the ocean, after which he and two other crewmates drifted for 47 days before landing on the Marshall Islands and being captured, and he spent the rest of the war as a Japanese POW. His story is captured in the book Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. It's an amazing book, and I suggest you read it if you haven't. Hillenbrand includes some amazing statistics about the danger of flying itself in World War II. And these are some excerpts from the book I thought might be relevant and interesting. As planes went, so went men in the Air Corps. 35,946 personnel died in non-battle situations, the vast majority of them in accidental crashes. Even in combat, airmen appeared to have been more likely to die from accidents than combat itself. A report issued by the AAF, the Army Air Forces, Surgeon General, suggests that in the 15th Air Force between November 1st, 1943 and May 25th, 1945, 70% of men listed as killed in action died in operational aircraft accidents, not as a result of enemy action. I should note here that Nile Kinnick had two brothers. His brother Benjamin Kinnick was born in 1919 and played football with Nile. Ben attended Iowa State University and graduated with an engineering degree in 1942. He joined the Marines and became a B-25 pilot, and he was stationed in the South Pacific as part of the 14th Marine Air Group. On September 16, 1944, Lieutenant Benjamin Kinnick's aircraft was shot down on a mission to New Guinea, and he and his crew were officially listed MIA before being declared dead in 1946. He is memorialized on the Tablets of the Missing, Manila, Philippines. A third Kinnick brother, George, was born in 1926 and became a Navy deck officer. He passed away in 1987. Laura Hillenbrand says of the men that died, "For airmen, the risks were impossible to shrug off. The dead weren't numbers on a page. They were their roommates, their drinking buddies, the crew that had been flying off their wing 10 seconds ago. Men didn't go one by one. A quarter of a barracks was lost at once. There were rarely funerals, for there were rarely bodies. Men were just gone, and that was the end of it." Note that Kinnick had experienced a difficult landing just 2 days before his death. From a story in the Nevada State Journal on June 26, 1943, a shipmate, aviation chief machinist mate Leo Hendrickson, stated that Kinnick had a narrow escape when his plane skidded over the side in landing. Kinnick leaped free and was hoisted aboard from the water. Our historical focus on World War II seems to be heavily biased toward the European theater. D-Day, Normandy, Omaha Beach, Saving Private Ryan, and the recent Apple series Masters of the Air featuring B-17 crews over Germany. We rarely see much about the Pacific theater where Kinnick was headed had he lived. There's so much water and so little land. Imagine those B-24 fighter crews trying to find their way home over that massive ocean. Egad. One more thing. I was confused for a while how Kinnick could have been on the Lexington in the Caribbean Sea when the Lexington was involved in the Battle of Midway, the turning point of the war in 1942. And I had forgotten it was a different USS Lexington. The Lexington at Midway was scuttled after the Battle of the Coral Sea when it was damaged beyond repair. The Lexington Kinnick was assigned to was a new carrier, originally named the Cabot, that would go on to participate in many battles and raids in the Pacific. I admit I have no idea the intricacies of what goes into naming ships, and maybe somebody in the comments can tell us. Those were the extra pieces I thought I'd include in the epilogue at this time. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos. Thank you.